This is China, the world's most populous country, where more than 1.6 million fraud calls harass people every day. It's a frightening number to hear, isn't it? But you'll be surprised to know that our own country ranks even higher than China in phone call scams. This problem is so big that every year, thousands of people worldwide commit suicide after being scammed by these fraudsters. Let's take a look at the lives of these victims. Through this story, we will see how these scammers operate. Do they commit these scams willingly, or are they forced into it? The story begins in South Korea, where we see a woman named Dae-ok. Dae-ok receives a call from an unknown number, and the man on the phone tells her that he is calling from her bank. Dae-ok is overjoyed to learn that her loan has been approved. This money is very important to her because her shop caught fire last week. Until she receives her insurance money, she planned to cover her expenses with this loan. A few days later, she goes to the bank again and asks to meet assistant manager Jae-mil. But the bank staff tells her that no one by that name works there. Hearing this, Dae-ok faints on the spot because she had been scammed big time. To report the fraud, she approaches Detective Park. When Park reads her report, he finds out that Dae-ok had transferred thousands of dollars to the scammer. He cannot believe how someone could be so careless in today's times. Detective Park consoles her but cannot do much else, as in such cases, it takes years to catch the culprits, and even after that, the chances of recovering the money are nearly zero. Dae-ok, who had hoped for help, sees her last resort also give up. With a face full of despair, she goes back to her children, but by then, everything had been ruined for her. Later, we are shown a three-story building in a remote city in China. In this building, serious crimes like kidnapping, murder, and extortion were carried out. All the boys you see here have been kidnapped. Do you know why? Because they are the ones who, every day, call innocent people and try to scam them. After their shifts, they are locked in their rooms, only to be forced to do the same work again the next morning. This was the daily routine of these kidnapped boys, and this was their life. One night, a boy named Jamin tries to escape from the building. However, he sees two boys who were caught while attempting to escape. The gangsters threaten them by saying they will release obscene pictures of their sisters and harm their families. When one of the boys protests and shows anger, he is beaten to death. The other boy has his leg broken and is left to die. Witnessing this horrifying scene, Jamin returns to the same path he came from and never attempts to escape again. These gangsters had access to the personal details and inappropriate videos of the kidnapped boys, which they used to blackmail them into compliance. Meanwhile, in Korea, Dae-ok and her children are forced to live on the streets. She doesn't tell her friends about the scam because she had borrowed money from them as well. If they found out, they would be furious with her. Detective Park calls Dae-ok and tells her that despite thorough investigation, they haven't been able to track down the scammers. He wants to close the case and advises her to take it as a life lesson and to never trust anyone blindly again. To prevent her case from being closed, Dae-ok rushes to the police station. But just then, she receives another call. On the phone, Jamin speaks. Jamin was the one who had scammed her, and Dae-ok recognizes his voice. She starts angrily shouting at him. Jamin explains that he didn't do it willingly, he was being forced into it. He also mentions that there are others like him. He pretends to send her a payment link but instead tells her the name of a hotel, which happens to be right in front of her. It is the same hotel where she saw something unusual the previous night. Dae-ok decodes the details from the link and realizes that the location is in China. She immediately goes to Detective Park and tells him that the scammer called her again and gave her this address. However, Detective Park refuses to investigate further. Frustrated, she shouts at him, asking if she needs to serve everything on a silver platter for him to act. Despite her anger, Park refuses to help further, leaving Dae-ok with no support. With nothing left to lose, Dae-ok decides to take matters into her own hands. To reopen the case, she starts looking for others in her city who have been victims of similar scams. Hearing their stories makes her feel her own grief is slightly smaller in comparison. During her search, she comes across a reward poster that promises $100,000 to anyone who provides information about the scammers. Dae-ok realizes what she needs to do, she is determined to catch these people at any cost. Jamin calls her again and asks if the police are coming. When Jamin learns that the hotel name he mentioned matches a more prominent hotel in the city, he becomes extremely anxious. Dae-ok needed some photos of the place to confirm the address. Although Jamin couldn't do much, he does mention that there are several sewing machines at the location. Meanwhile, we see police officers arriving to take Dae-ok's children away. A complaint had been filed against her, accusing her of not properly caring for her kids. According to the law, keeping children in such conditions amounted to child abuse. Dae-ok tries to stop them, but the police don't listen and send her children to a government care home. This forces Dae-ok to reveal the truth to her friends. A woman named Suk-ja agrees to accompany her to China. They just needed to locate the call center, and the $100,000 reward would be theirs. However, Bong-rim discourages them, saying, "If the police couldn't do this, how can we?" The journey to China was only an hour and a half, and Bong-rim's sister lived there. After much persuasion, the three of them finally agreed on a plan and set out for China the next day. Their task was to infiltrate the sewing factories and investigate. At the first factory, they attempted to enter under the pretense of showing clothing samples. However, Dae-ok didn't speak Chinese, which led to the factory owner pushing her out. Meanwhile, Jamin tried to figure out a way to get access to a phone. During this time, he noticed a boy named Kyung severely beating another girl. Jamin couldn't stand by and intervene to help her, but both he and the girl ended up being beaten that night. In the building, only the manager had access to a phone. Jamin begged him, saying he'd work hard and give him all his earnings in return. Impressed by Jamin's persistence, the manager assigned him the task of supervising the other boys. Seizing this opportunity, Jamin later took revenge on the boy who had beaten him and Kyung the previous night. The manager also gave Jamin a phone, which he used to secretly take pictures of the facility. He gathered a significant amount of evidence, but due to a lack of network connectivity, he couldn't send the photos to Dae-ok. Meanwhile, Dae-ok and her friends investigated various sewing factories but couldn't find anything suspicious. Her friends started losing hope, but Dae-ok remained convinced that Jamin was telling the truth. Determined, she decided to search all the 72 nearby hotels one by one to find him. Back at the call center, Jamin earned the manager's trust by helping him kidnap new boys for the scam operations, solidifying his position as a reliable worker. Late at night, Jamin broke into the manager's office and sent all the photos he had taken to the Korean authorities via email. There were many photos, detailing everything. That's why this mission was taking time. Meanwhile, Kyung arrives there. Jamin tells him that no one should find out about this or he will expose that Kyung is his partner in the scam. At Jamin's request, Kyung starts arguing with some people outside, giving Jamin a bit more time. Meanwhile, all the photos get emailed successfully, and now all Jamin could do was wait. When the pictures reach the police in Korea, they spring into action. Detective Park calls Dae-ok and says, "You were right. That boy has sent us data of more than 2,700 people whom these scammers have cheated out of $17 million. Park forwards the photos to Dae-ok, and she finally figures out which hotel they need to investigate. Among the photos, Jamin had included his own picture for identification. When they reach the hotel, Dae-ok spots Jamin and realizes he's the boy. Suk-ja secretly tries to take a picture of him as evidence, but she forgets to insert the memory card into the camera, missing the opportunity. The four of them couldn't sit in the car all day keeping watch, so Dae-ok sets up a small sewing machine stall nearby to keep an eye on the hotel without drawing suspicion. Jamin's attention gets drawn toward her, and when the moment is right, Suk-ja successfully takes his photo. They gather the confirmed address and a lot of evidence, which Dae-ok forwards to Detective Park. The Korean authorities then begin coordinating with Chinese police. The next day, Jamin approaches Dae-ok under the pretense of getting some clothes fixed. However, his manager follows him there as well. The manager starts speaking to Dae-ok in Chinese, but she doesn't understand a word. She begins to worry that he might become suspicious of her. Just then, Bong-rim steps in and saves the situation. Fluent in Chinese, she skillfully engages the manager in conversation and takes him away. Jamin can't believe that Dae-ok is sitting right in front of him. Dae-ok hands Jamin a phone with a paper stuck to the back, instructing him, "Tomorrow, Detective Park will raid this place with the Chinese police. When your boss, Young Hwan, arrives, message us immediately." That night, all the managers gather in one place after being informed that their boss, Young Hwan, wanted to meet them. Jamin realizes this is the perfect opportunity. He quickly sneaks into the bathroom and sends a message to Dae-ok about Young Hwan's arrival. Shortly after, a group of armed men arrives in a van and storms inside, killing everyone. Dae-ok wants to go inside to see what's happening, but her friends stop her. The armed men eliminate the managers and even Jamin, attempting to erase all evidence. A little later, Young Hwan arrives at the scene. It's the perfect chance to catch him, but Detective Park warns them against doing anything reckless. Meanwhile, Kyung, who had taken drugs earlier, collapses in the bathroom. When he regains consciousness and steps out, he sees the aftermath, everyone dead. Young Hwan escapes with his men while Dae-ok and her team, still waiting for Detective Park, grow impatient. Just then, Kyung emerges, carrying an injured Jamin on his shoulder. Dae-ok notices Jamin is gravely hurt and urgently needs medical attention. While checking her phone, she discovers that Jamin recorded audio of Young Hwan and his plans. From the recording, she learns that Young Hwan plans to flee the country from Qingdao Airport. Unable to wait for Detective Park, the trio heads to Qingdao Airport themselves to catch Young Hwan. Searching for him in the crowded airport proves challenging. Dae-ok remembers from the video that Young Hwan wears an expensive watch. Spotting someone with a similar build and watch, she is convinced it's him. She and Suk-ja follow him, but their pursuit doesn't last long as Young Hwan notices them. Calmly, he approaches them and asks, "Why are you following me?" Dae-ok, terrified but summoning her courage, replies, "I'm a victim. You scammed me." Young Hwan smirks and asks, "How much did my people take from you?" Dae-ok tells him, $32,000. Hearing this, Young Hwan laughs mockingly and says, "You're chasing me over such a small amount?" He places a stack of cash worth $100,000 in front of them and says, "Take this and leave." Dae-ok is still frightened, but Suk-ja quickly grabs the money and tells Dae-ok, "We shouldn't mess with this guy." The story reaches a powerful climax as Dae-ok refuses to take the money Young Hwan offers her at the airport. Instead, she throws the cash back at him, declaring, "The scam that ruined my life wasn't my fault. It was yours. You're the criminal here." Her fiery words spark Young Hwan's fury. Determined to silence her, he drags her into a bathroom and beats her viciously. Despite his anger, he knows escaping the country is his top priority. As he attempts to leave, Young Hwan realizes his passport is missing. He returns to Dae-ok, who reveals that she has his boarding pass, leaving him unable to flee. Enraged beyond measure, he tries to strangle her, but just before he can end her life, the police arrive and arrest him on charges of assault and fraud. Detective Park witnesses Dae-ok's injuries and, unable to control his own anger, punches Young Hwan multiple times. Park later apologizes to Dae-ok for arriving late, and together they leave the airport, victorious. Dae-ok feels a deep sense of justice, experiencing what she calls the best day of her life. Meanwhile, Jamin's life is spared after critical medical treatment. The police locate his family, reuniting him with his loved ones. Months later, Dae-ok's life begins to stabilize, and she returns to normalcy. However, Young Hwan's lawyer repeatedly visits her, offering substantial bribes, up to $300,000, for her to withdraw her charges. Dae-ok steadfastly refuses, choosing justice over money for the sake of all the victims who suffered because of the scam. The movie ends with a caption revealing that Dae-ok's story is inspired by the true life of Kim Sung-ja, who, in 2016, single-handedly exposed a similar scam ring. Despite her incredible bravery, she never received the government reward of $100,000. Additionally, the mafia boss's lawyer made multiple attempts to bribe her into retracting her testimony, but Kim Sung-ja refused to compromise her integrity. The credits roll with a hopeful message: standing for justice, even against powerful forces, can create lasting change. Thank you for sticking with this thrilling journey. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one.